Hello and welcome to the English with Neil podcast, where you will build your vocabulary and improve your listening skills through American English. My name is Neil Humphrey, and the topic of this episode is living in Japan as an American. So, in this episode, I'm going to be covering three main points. Point number one is treatment. How am I treated here as an American in Japan? Number two, some of the challenges that I face here living as an American in Japan. And number three, just some cultural differences between the Japanese culture and the American culture. So let's get started with topic number one, treatment. How am I treated here in Japan as an American? I would say that I am treated pretty well here in Japan as an American. I know if you go online, if you go to YouTube, there's a lot of videos living in Japan as a something. And I know there's a lot of videos about people sharing their experiences, mostly bad experiences, because that's what gains a lot of attention. But for me, personally, I think I'm treated pretty well here in Japan as an American. I think people treat me just like a normal person. I don't think they really look at me and treat me any differently because I'm an American. I mean, sometimes I have that just because of how I look, or, if I can't explain myself well in Japanese. But for the most part, I think I'm treated pretty well. And also, I think I'm treated well because of of where I live. I live in an area that is pretty foreign friendly. Foreign friendly just means they're open to a lot of non-Japanese people. I live near the beach. So there's a lot of tourists in the area. And not too far from where I live, there's a lot of tourist attractions where there's a lot of tourists. So there's a lot of Americans, a lot of people from Asia, people from um, Africa, Europe, pretty much all over the world come to my area. So where I live, people are pretty open to foreigners. So I don't think I have anything to say, anything bad to say about my treatment here in Japan. Okay, number two, some of the challenges. So, what are the challenges that I face as an American living in Japan? Well, one of them is clothing. So, I'm actually very tall. I am 6'2". So in centimeters, that would be about 192, 193 centimeters. So I'm really tall. So I tower over a lot of Japanese people. Tower over just means I look above, or my height is much different than a regular Japanese person. I think Japanese men tend to be around 100 and I would say maybe 150, 160 centimeters. So they come to about my shoulder, but I look over a lot of Japanese people. And the challenge that comes with that, my height, is finding clothing. It's very hard for me to find clothing in just a regular Japanese department store. I have no problem finding shirts. The problem I have is finding pants like jeans, or finding socks, specifically finding shoes. So I have a very big foot. So in America, my size is size 13. And in Japan, that would be about 31 centimeters. And you cannot find that size in a regular shoe store. In my experience, where I live, the biggest shoe size that I found here is about 29 centimeters. So that's about a US 10 or 11. So for when I buy shoes, I either have to buy them from Amazon, or I go to this store we have here called Sakazen. It's basically like an American big and tall store. So they sell a lot of large clothing like XXXL, or they might have shoes that are 33 centimeters. And that's like a specialty store. So you don't find a lot of normal size people. And that's usually for like bigger people or taller people. So that's usually where I shop. So clothing is a problem. And another thing is the space. So Japan is a very it's a very tight knit country. So everything is so compact. Everything is right next to each other. So for example, like where I live, everything is so small. And I think that's most of Japan. You won't really find a lot of space unless you go to the countryside. But if you live in a city like I do, everything is so close together because it's so populated. Populated means there's a lot of people here. And so there's not a lot of space to do things. So that's another challenge, especially like some of the door seals. I have to duck my head under to get under the door, so just things like that. I find that a little challenging. And the last thing I want to talk about are some cultural differences between the Japanese culture and the American culture. So I guess the two biggest ones I found are number one, Japanese people in general. This is not, I'm not speaking for everybody, but compared to America, Japanese people are more conservative. Conservative means that they're kind of closed off. They keep their opinions to themselves. They're relatively more traditional versus like in the US where we kind of speak what's on our mind. If we have something on our mind, we usually say it in the US. But over here, Japanese people really like to avoid confrontation. They avoid, arguments, and so they keep a lot of things to themselves. So I think that's the biggest thing that I found is just Japanese people are more conservative versus, American people are more open or more or they speak their mind a lot more. And the next thing I found is in Japan there's a system for everything. Everything goes by the book. So if you want to do something, there's always some type of system for it. It's kind of hard to explain, uh, on this podcast, but just know that everything in Japan has a system. And if you try to challenge that system, people kind of go against the norm. So if it's normal to go by the book, people go by the book. And if you don't go by the book, they kind of look at you differently. So Japan is very structured. It's a very structured society versus where I'm from in California, we're more laid back. We're kind of more flexible with things. And so that's another big difference that I found. So, but it's not too bad. There's good and bad to both sides. So that's some of the things. So again, living in Japan as an American, the treatment, I think I'm treated pretty well. The challenges I face, since I'm so tall, it's hard for me to find clothing and just a space issue. Japan is very small. And some cultural differences again, Japanese people I find are more conservative versus um, in America where we're more open, and the structure here versus being more laid back um, in the US. But other than that, I think my life here is pretty great. I've been here for 11 years and I don't really seeing myself returning to the US anytime soon. I'm pretty established here. I have my business here, I have my family here. And so I don't think I'm going to be going anywhere anytime soon. But those are just some of the things that I find, you know, challenging or different being in Japan. All right, everyone. That is it for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed today's podcast. Thank you for watching, and thank you for listening as well. If you'd like to watch the next episode, please consider subscribing to the channel and the podcast. And I look forward to talking to you in the next video. Okay. Take care, everyone. Talk to you soon. Peace.